It's the mid 2000s. George Bush just got reelected, and you've been listening to Bad Day by Danielle Powders before it got overplayed. Me, myself, was browsing through channels trying to find what kind of horror movies were on TV. And I stumbled across the Bravo Network. And yes, I said Bravo Network. When they had a series called 100 Scariest Movie Moments of All Time. And every week when a new episode came out, I was more and more anxious to see what would be number one on this list. And this show right here is what I felt like kind of sparked an interest in a bunch of TV shows coming out with 100 greatest countdowns. With 100 Scariest Movie Moments, I feel like this is one of the greatest countdowns that I like to enjoy. It's so binge-worthy to watch. You have your day off doing nothing, get in a cozy blanket with some snacks, and start it at number 100. And it always felt weird being on a channel like Bravo, instead of something like Sci-Fi or AMC. There were interviews with some of the directors and actors, such as John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Peter Jackson, Rob Zombie, Stephen King, Rob Reiner, and way much more. It was always hilarious to see their reaction of when they first watched the movie or talk about their own movie and see the other people's reaction. And not to mention that you talk to the audience and kind of teach them a little bit about the making of the movie and kind of explain why that movie was scary at the time. Because honestly, it kind of pissed me off as a kid that Jaws was number one. But as I got older, I start to appreciate it more and kind of see where they're coming from with that decision for it to be number one. Not to mention, the show introduced me to more horror films I never knew back then. Overall, at the time, it was a very interesting concept, and I really loved watching the whole series after it, when it would replay every year, and I don't think they have in the couple of previous years, but it really defined what a countdown should be. 2 years later came 30 even scarier movie moments, and in 2009, 13 scariest movie moments. I've seen all three of them, part of a tradition for a long time, and I never understood why they kept making the list shorter and shorter, and I really enjoyed the feeling of an episodic countdown. Not just for the built-up, just to see what number one is, but it was cool to see what this long list of things, of movies and everything that was awesome. And then all of a sudden, VH1 had this explosion of 100 greatest countdowns. You had 100 greatest hip-hop songs of all time. You had 100 shocking moments in rock and roll history. You had the 100 greatest rock and roll artists of all time. Even E! Network had 100 greatest cute child stars. You had 100 greatest songs of the 80s, 100 greatest songs of the 90s, and even 100 greatest one-hit wonders of the 80s, but there was no one-hit wonders of the 90s or anything like that. It was hectic. There was all these countdowns and all these different celebrities coming in and talking about it, and it was awesome. And like I said, I never always agreed what they decided to choose what number one was. I think the one that got to me the most, more than the Jaws, was the 100 greatest hard rock songs of all time. And it was viewer decision too. They had, I believe VH1 had a website where you could go online and vote, but I still don't believe that everybody decided to choose Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses is like the greatest hard rock song of all time. It's a great song, don't get me wrong, but I believe it's a little overplayed. And I can imagine that a lot of people are probably pissed at the 100 cutest child stars of all time because they were fictitious child actors. They weren't real child actors. They were Bart and Lisa Simpson. I kind of agreed with it, especially being a big fan of The Simpsons, but I feel like that was kind of a cheat for actual child star actors. But I like to believe these shows put an impact on my knowledge on the entertainment industry. I never heard of Velvet Underground at the time until the music artists came out to rank them so high up. But also during this time, YouTube started to become bigger and people were making their own videos on Windows Movie Maker with the generic blue background and white text of their own countdowns. And in a matter of time, it seemed like these VH1 countdowns and a lot of all the other TV show countdowns started to die off mainstream TV. And now it's kind of a regular thing to see on YouTube under 15 picks or whatever the topic is. Usually 15, most commonly I believe is 10, but it seems like 15 is like the most, or 20. And it's something about it is very interesting to see somebody else's opinion on some of the stuff. I feel like because when you go to YouTube to see some of the stuff, you're looking for something that you're interested in to see who else is interested and what their personal favorites are. But it was nice looking back at a brief time in TV history, because I'm sure kids of this generation and probably future generations are probably thinking, why would you want to spend 3 hours just to hear somebody else's opinion, just to see what they think is number one? And even so, I don't really have personal favorites, so it's easy to disagree what number one is. But it's just something enjoyable, and especially with all these interviews of people who are involved or comedians that have a nice comedic touch on it. And in a way it kind of died out, but in a way it's still kind of present. So sometimes you have to kind of appreciate the past to really appreciate what you have now.